he is being treated not just as a former president, but almost as though he is a sitting president. As Boris, you just noted, getting a briefing from FEMA, getting a briefing from the National Guard. That is not something that is typically just offered to a candidate. They are treating him as though he is a former president who is there to help. And one thing that I had noticed earlier during our 1 p.m. conversation was that Donald Trump did not have that much to offer in terms of resources since he is not a sitting president. But I will note that he and the campaign say that they have arrived in that area with trucks full of supplies that they plan on giving out. So there is something there for them to offer. He also said that he had a tanker truck full of gasoline, which obviously, if you've ever covered one of these storms, you understand that one of the first things and hardest things to come by is gasoline. So he said that he was going to be giving that out. He is clearly taking this seriously as a politician is.
At least 128 people have been killed. More than 600 are unaccounted for in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene in the US. Joe Biden is promising aid for affected communities, but Donald Trump is accusing him of being missing in action. And Annalise Nielsen filed this report from Asheville, North Carolina.
We're here in Asheville, North Carolina. Now, this has been the epicenter of the damage wrought on the area by Hurricane Helene. We want to show you a bit of what that looks like. Here in town, this is a scene we've seen all over, where the water clearly came up high from the riverbanks and took so much of the town with it. They had record high rain. They're saying it's the worst storm that's ever hit this area. But 5 days since Hurricane Helene hit the United States, the question has been, why are we only getting a sense of how badly hit this region has been now? One of the reasons for this is the fact we're in the Appalachian Mountains. There is a difficulty communicating with people who are so remote at the best of times. But what we've seen with this storm is a lack of communication because the cell towers went down. Mobile phones have been difficult, and that's why at this point there is still 600 people unaccounted for. Many of those they're hoping are stuck in their homes and simply don't have a means to communicate. But the fear is that the death toll could rise. But also, considering this point, there's ongoing issues with people in town that we've spoken to accessing water, accessing food. The supermarkets have only just opened up. And inevitably, in an election year, it becomes a question of, is the government doing enough to help the people who are stuck here? We spoke to some people in town about how they were feeling about the government response.
It seems like they got ready for a lot of things in advance. And my understanding is the airport is now open, and so we're getting a lot of supplies, water and food supplies coming.
Without knowing any news, it's very hard to say because we haven't got any way of finding out. No signals, so I don't know.
Honestly, I think Biden and Harris have done more than anybody that I think of.
The Trump campaign made a visit to the south of Georgia, which has also been hit by this hurricane, handing out relief supplies and making the point that they say Donald Trump has been on the scene and Kamala Harris is nowhere to be seen, that she was too busy at a fundraiser in Nevada. Now, Kamala Harris did cut her trip short to return to Washington, D.C. to have that briefing from FEMA to learn about what could be done. And her campaign said that they weren't going to be making a trip here until they knew it wasn't going to be taking away from the presence on the ground of emergency resources and ensuring people had what they needed. When we asked people here how they felt about it, many were feeling like they were so far removed from watching the campaign, they didn't have any sense that she should be here or that it was the kind of scene that you would expect, the kind of response as what we saw with something like Hurricane Katrina.
I plan to be on the ground as soon as possible, but as soon as possible without disrupting any emergency response operations, because that must be the highest priority in the first order of business. The destruction we have seen in Alabama, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia is heartbreaking.
The federal government is not being responsive, but they're having a very hard time getting the president on the phone. He won't get on, and of course the vice president, she's out someplace campaigning, looking for money. So they have to be focused over here. It's too big. This is a really bad one, and the governor's doing a good job, but he's having a hard time getting the president on the phone. They're being very non-responsive.
People here have been told the earliest they can guarantee that their power will be back online will be by Friday, and that's because the fallen power lines are still such a hazard around this area. That drags out just how much longer it is before they truly know the death toll from this. But so far, the people we've spoken to have felt confident about the government response, that they're getting the resources they need, and that this is coming in the timeliest fashion, considering the circumstances. Annalise Nielsen, Sky News in Asheville, North Carolina.